Hello, I'm Michael Wunsch. I'm the plant pathologist at the North Dakota State University Carrington Research Extension Center. I'd like to take a moment and share with you what we have learned about the impact of fungicide spray volume on white mold management in pinto beans. I get questions about spray volume very frequently, and this is usually the first thing people think about as they're trying to improve the performance of their fungicides against white mold and other diseases. We conducted this testing in Carrington with pinto beans seeded to narrow rows, 14 inches. Seeding rate was 90,000 viable seeds an acre. All the applications were made with a tractor mounted sprayer equipped with a pulse width modulation system. We used pulse width to maintain the same nozzles and application pressure and the same driving speed across all the spray volume treatments. Experimental replicates, we used 7 to 14 depending on the study year. We used a large number of experimental replicates because white mold disease pressure tends to be spatially inconsistent, and by having more replicates, what you do is you increase the odds that every treatment will be exposed to levels of high versus low disease pressure the same number of times. We assessed white mold by individually evaluating every plant in at least half of the rows of the plot for white mold severity. We harvested by essentially knifing the dry beans. We clipped them at the base, we windrowed them, and then we passed them through the combine after they had dried down. We did this rather than straight harvesting because typically we see some degree of lodging in these studies, and the lodging is not well correlated to the white mold severity. And if we were to straight cut them, we would get additional source of bias in our yield data that would confound our ability to differentiate treatments. We applied supplemental irrigation as needed to establish disease pressure on white mold disease pressure because without white mold we can't learn anything in this study. This chart provides details on application methods, and I would encourage you just pause the video or look at the corresponding PDF for details. The key things are that this chart provides the precise driving speeds that we utilized in every application, the nozzles and pressures. We use T-jet nozzles simply because they're well known by producers in our area, and the droplet size associated with that nozzle treatment, the application interval, and the number of experimental replicates. We applied topsin or generic topsin at 40 fluid ounces in the first application from 2021 to 2024, followed by Endura 7 to 12 days later, depending on the study. In 2020, we applied Endura twice, 11 days apart. We modified pulse width as needed to maintain the same driving speed, nozzle, and application pressures across spray volume treatments, as I mentioned before. This was a manual setting of the pulse width. We manually also set the driving speed. Okay, we conducted this calibration after the fungicide was added to the tank by running the sprayer for precisely 10.0 seconds and actually measuring the output from every single nozzle. If the output was perfect, then great, we went out and sprayed. If it was not perfect, we adjusted the pulse width until we got it perfect, and we kept on measuring until we had it perfect. The applications are done with this tractor-mounted sprayer. You can see a driving pass. For driving that sprayers, this driving pass is smoothed out with a cultivator before application to ensure that it is very smooth and we do not have any swaying of the boom. We want those nozzles 20 inches above the canopy as recommended for the 110-degree T-jet nozzles. What you'll notice with the sprayer operator is that he'll turn on this boom. When I play this video, he'll turn on the boom before he gets to that blue flag. The blue flag marks the start of the treatment plot. And then he turns it off right after the blue flag because that marks the end of the treatment plot. And then you'll notice there's a little stretch before he reaches the next flag. That little stretch, as well as the stretch in the front between the white and blue flags, these stretches exist specifically for turning on and off the boom while the tractor is driving. Okay, they are non-harvested, they're not assessed for disease. They are stretches between the treatment plots. They exist specifically to ensure that we can turn on and off the boom without confounding, without getting any product onto adjacent treatment plots. With that, I will play the video showing the application process. And notice how he got the boom turned off before he got to that yellow flag, which is the start of the next plot. Now this video was taken in soybeans, but we did the exact same methods in the dry beans. The application process was exactly the same, and just like in these soybeans, we sprayed a 10-foot width with nozzle overlap. Okay, this chart here provides details on the crop growth stage when we made these applications. It also provides details on the spray conditions. What I'm providing here are delta T values, which show the evaporative potential. We avoided spraying under high wind conditions, and we definitely avoided spraying under any inversion as well. Okay, that's a given, but the delta T is a measure of evaporative potential. When the delta T values get very high, the finer spray droplets are more inclined to evaporate before they hit the crop surface. When the delta T values get very low, you get risk of the finer droplets drifting at a higher incidence, and also when the delta T values are very, very low, you have a much greater risk that that canopy is going to be wet with dew. What you'll notice as you look at these delta T numbers is that we applied under optimal delta T values in every single application except the two applications in 2022. So any delta T value between 3.0 and 9.0 is considered optimal. Delta T values between 1.0 and 2.0 are considered marginal, and delta T values between above 9.0, between 9.0 and 10.0 are considered marginal. So in 2022, application 1 was made under marginal conditions with high evaporative potential, i.e. a high risk that those finer droplets will evaporate before they hit the surface. Application 2 was made under very low delta T values, where there's a greater risk of drift and also a risk that that canopy is wet with dew, and you can get the associated deposition issues when you have a canopy that is wet. All right, so what did we learn? What we saw was tremendous variability in the response to spray volume. In terms of what I have done here, is I have provided combined analysis across every study, as well as the numbers from every single study. We have disease severity, which is the percent of the canopy exhibiting white mold symptoms, and yield. And I have shaded in a kind of light yellow-brown color the maximum yield and the lowest disease severity rating numerically, even if we did not see statistical separation. What I want to point out right away is if you look at the yield data, you notice that in 2 of the 6 studies, we had our highest yields at 10 gallons an acre, 2 of the 6 studies at 20 gallons an acre, and 2 at 25 gallons an acre. That's just about as perfect a distribution as you could get, minus the fact that we don't have any at 15 gallons an acre, for saying that there is no impact. Okay, if you look across these numbers, there's only 1 of those 6 studies where you have a stepwise increase in yield as you increase your spray volume. Those are the Vibrant Pintos in 2023, but notice we did not see it on the Torion Pintos that exact same year. Okay, and if you look at the disease severity data, now you have a greater proportion of the time that the lowest disease severity is seen in the 25 gallons an acre. But if you look at those same studies, you do not see a stepwise reduction in disease severity as you increase your spray volume. And so as a result, you can conclude that the effect is minimal. Looking at the combined analysis here in greater detail, now I have a bar graph showing this. This is the average across all 6 studies, and then a scatter plot that shows the results for every single study for yield gain from the fungicide. Those are the circles, and then the bars in that scatter plot are the average. What you can see is that there's little or no effect on spray volume. If there's any effect at all, you don't see it until you hit 25 gallons an acre, and then it's very minimal. So what we learned from this project is that fungicide spray volume does not appear to be a particularly effective tool for improving the management of white mold in pinto beans. While this result might seem surprising, it parallels what we found in soybeans, where we did very rigorous fungicide spray volume testing across multiple years and 2 locations. In that testing, we saw only a very modest reduction in the performance of the fungicide as we dropped spray volume below 10 gallons an acre. And then when we increased spray volume from 10 to 12.5 to 15 gallons an acre, we saw no response to fungicide spray volume for management of white mold in soybeans. And so in conclusion, it appears that a 10-gallon acre spray volume is sufficient, and you are unlikely to see much of a response, if any, to increasing your spray volume above that. I will give you a caveat, though, that most of this testing was conducted under optimal spray conditions. We would expect the greatest response to fungicide spray volume when evaporative potential is very high, i.e. delta T values are 9 or higher. And under those conditions, the risk that the finer spray droplets evaporate before they hit the crop canopy increases, and thus under those conditions we would expect the greatest probability of a response to fungicide spray volume. And again, we hardly did any testing under those conditions in these studies. So with that said, I don't know how fungicide spray volume will impact white mold management if you're spraying when it's extremely dry, but usually those are not the conditions we face when we're worried about white mold. I would like to thank my staff, Aaron Faust, Swan Collis, Jesse Hafner, Gabby Henson, also our seasonal workers. These individuals work very hard, and it is the effort of these staff and their long hours that makes this research possible. I'd also like to give very sincere thanks to the North Harvest Bean Growers Association, the North Dakota Crop Protection Product Harmonization Registration Board, administered by the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. These two funding agencies provided the grant funds to pay for the salaries of my staff to do this work and to pay for the supplies associated with executing this project. And I would like to thank the private companies that do contract fungicide testing with us, because it is the funding obtained from that contract fungicide testing that allows us to invest in the equipment that we need to run these studies. So that tractor and that sprayer that you saw in the video, that was purchased with funds obtained by conducting contract testing for companies. Our plot combine was purchased that way, and our some other pieces of very critical equipment were purchased that way. I would like to give sincere thanks to Bollingberg Seeds and Green Valley Bean Company for donating the seed used in our spray volume studies. Bollingberg Seeds gave the PINTO beans used in this study, and Green Valley Bean gave the kidney bean seed used in the parallel spray volume studies conducted on kidney beans that I present separately. So give your say thanks to Kurt and John if you see them. I very much appreciate their willingness to work with us, first off, and then second, to their generosity in actually giving us this seed. With that, thank you very much for your time. I hope this information is of value as you seek to improve your operations and improve the profitability of your operations. Thank you.